Talk radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Good evening. How you doing? Fade to Black. Yeah. Kicking off a new week. Today is Monday, July 22nd, 2024. Very excited. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And tonight, that's right, Kathleen Marden is with us. And I've called the show tonight Betty and Barney Hill only because, how do I say this? I want to talk. Well, of course, we're going to discuss Betty and Barney Hill tonight, but Kathleen has been in the game for decades, and there's a lot I'm going to pull out of her tonight. I'm going to do my best as your host of this show. So we're going to do that, Betty and Barney Hill, and that just means we can talk about anything. It's just a big umbrella, the Betty and Barney Hill umbrella. Tomorrow night, Glenn Kreisberg is with us. We're going to be talking about archaeoastronomy. What is it? And all of that stuff. That is tomorrow night. Wednesday night, Keith Thompson is with us, and we're going to be talking about his book, The UFO Paradox. And yeah, that's a great title for a book, The UFO Paradox. Thursday, we are off air. No show Thursday night. I will be here in town at night late. I'm doing video production all weekend. So that kicks off on Thursday and goes into the evening. So Thursday, I have the night off, but I have to go and work for the entire weekend. And there you go. I wanted to mention, this is very important. We'll bust this out later in social media. But I got an email today from Brian Forrester letting me know some exciting news. We've got only three spaces available for our trip to Peru and Bolivia that has been sold out for months. And we had some tickets that came available. Those sold out. We've got three more as of this morning that are available. So the links are below. It's an amazing, amazing tour. Being able to go to, yes, Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman and Lake Titicaca and Puma Punku and all of just all of the stuff that you can imagine is going to go down on that trip. So it is life-changing. We have 3 spots open. It's November 15th through the 27th. And there's even a Nazca Lines extension pre-tour that you can sign up for too as well. The links are below. All right, tonight, Kathleen Marden is with us. I want to talk about Kathleen tonight. And I'm just going to leave that right there. And Betty and Barney Hill is something that, especially over the last year, I have gone back and revisited in depth. And it's such an amazing case. And I'm asked all the time. So, Jimmy, okay, what are the big ones? Well, okay, there's the obvious, but then there's Betty and Barney Hill. It's one of the most extensively researched and investigated experiences in ufology, and it's not only an important case, but it's historic. And so I always mention Betty and Barney Hill when anybody asks me that question, and they should ask me that question. Absolutely, yeah. I've got some cases that are pretty important to me, and Betty and Barney Hill is way, way, way on top of my list. Now, she has been investigating for decades, and how has she changed over the decades? And where is Kathleen today? She has worked with MUFON since 1991. She worked on the Edgar Mitchell Free Advisory Board, involving 5,000 experiencers. Of course, she's been on numerous television shows and Fade to Black and Coast to Coast and podcasts. She lectures all the time. I've done a lot of conferences with Kathleen. And tonight, we're just going to continue all of the wonderful conversations we have had over the years. Her website is below, Kathleen-Marden.com. The links are below. And I would like to welcome back the one and only, the beautiful Kathleen Marden. Kathleen, good evening, young lady. What's going on? Oh, you muted yourself. Let me unmute you. Oh, no, you need to unmute yourself. Click the mute button.
Good. Hello, Jimmy. Nice to
After that dramatic intro, you're muted. What am I gonna do?
I thought you were going to unmute me.
Yeah. See, if you mute yourself, I can't unmute you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, now you know. Now you have the power. You have the power. Oh man, Kathleen, it's great to see you. And we've had so many great conversations over the years, and we're going to do that again tonight. But I was thinking, how do I? How we've covered everything, right? You've done so much. What question can I ask that Kathleen's never been asked before? Besides, like a really good recipe, that'd be a good way to start the show. But what? And I thought about this a lot, and so I'm going to start with this. And there are just a handful of our friends that deserve a question like this, and you know all of them. Okay, so with all of your decades of research, 8 books, all of your work with Stanton Friedman, and going back to the early 1960s, right? With everything that you have learned, here we are in 2024. How have you changed with the subject? What have you found out?
Wow. Well, back in 1961, I knew absolutely nothing about it. Here I was 13 years old. And my aunt called, and she and Barney had a UFO experience, flying saucer, I should say, the night before. And they were worried about contamination because it had come so close to them. So, boy, I was really excited about getting up to their house. And that was the moment I began to learn. I learned that Betty's watch had stopped and would never run again. Her dress was torn, and the tops of Barney's dress shoes were so deeply scraped that he had to buy new shoes. There were these shiny spots on the trunk of Betty's car. That's what they were driving that night, Betty's 1957 Chevy. They hadn't been there the previous evening when they were having this experience. They only were there when they arrived home. And it was really kind of perplexing. So my mother had called our neighbor, who was a physicist, and he told Betty to take a compass out to the car. She didn't know those spots were there yet because they didn't go to the trunk. She told Barney, don't bring anything in, because she was worried about contamination. And so I saw those spots, and they were all the same size. They were shiny. And those were the spots that had a magnetic field around them. And they were in the same location where Betty and Barney heard those series of code-like buzzing sounds the night before that caused the car to vibrate and a tingling sensation to pass through their bodies just before they sort of became semi-aware and then lost full awareness of what had occurred. So just in going through that, learning about that, and I have to tell you, when I was a kid, my favorite books were Nancy Drew mysteries. I really enjoyed detective work. In fact, my brother grew up and became a police detective, but I didn't. Obviously, I enjoyed investigating UFO sightings and then alien abductions. So that was the start of it. And as things happened, there would be well-known investigators who would come. And of course, Betty always took everyone to visit the family. We only lived like 20 miles away from one another. And I grew up across the street from my grandparents, who were Betty's parents. And they would come down at least once a week. But whenever a craft like landed on my grandparents' property, then there was an investigation. A ufologist from NICAP initially would come out and take samples, measure things, look at things, interview people. And then Jacques Vallée came out, and I was really intrigued by meeting him and his wife. And there was a team of scientists who, while Betty was doing what was one of the early CE5 experiments, they called it a psychophysics experiment, but they had given her sort of a script to read of where they wanted that craft to come in, so that they could see it. They were hoping for it to land. They wanted to grab a piece of hardware. The only thing is that they didn't pay attention to how long it took Betty to begin to send those telepathic messages to those ETs for it to be successful. They were in a big hurry, and they didn't give her the adequate amount of time that she needed. And so that time it wasn't successful, but there were twice that craft landed on my grandparents' farm. And one of those times there were two people who saw the craft come in. Did you want to ask the question?
See, this is why I love having you on the show. I always learn something. And that right there, I just have to say, let's pump the brakes for a second. Let's not let this just cruise by and move on. We have a lot of stuff to cover, but two crafts landing at your grandparents' house is not coincidence.
No.
And if there's another part to this. Betty and Barney, the way that they originally described the craft was something that not only you heard, but there were other conversations with researchers that were going on at that time. And I'm just going to say it. It's so cliche now, nuts and bolts,
Yes.
right? We all had, I did. We all went through that, right?
That's what it was.
That's what we picture. And where we are today with it, I still believe there are nuts and bolts situations going on. I have seen them.
Yes.
But there is probably something that is occurring faster than light, or wormholes, or something interdimensional. There's that element too as well. Have you evolved along with all of this type of mindset?
Well, I have, Jimmy. I wanted to say that after that the craft landed on my grandparents' farm, this was like 165 feet away from my childhood home. Mm-hmm. And after that, we started to have these weird effects in my childhood home, like these light orbs that we'd never seen before. Things would just like fly off shelves. That had never happened before. In fact, it was a year or so later, I was in college, and my boyfriend came home with me to go on. It was in the summer, and my parents had a cabin cruiser. We'd go out on the ocean fishing, and they'd invited him to come with the family. So he spent the night in the room that had been my brother's bedroom. And there had been a lot of activity in that room. And that particular night, in the middle of the night, we were all awakened by him just yelling and screaming and running. And the coat hangers had lifted out of my brother's closet and flew across the room and landed on top of my boyfriend. Really weird stuff was happening that had never happened before that landing, as far as I know. And we didn't think of it as being related to that landing. We thought that all of a sudden we had ghosts in the house that we never had before. Right. I mean, we're looking for skeletons in the ground. What's going on? You know, what is suddenly happening here? And
holy water and sage, right? Holy water and sage. And, you know, that explains a lot. I've been having strange stuff move around the house, and I've been thinking, well, I'm convinced my place is haunted. Maybe it's just E.T. Okay, let me ask you this question, Kathleen. What would freak you out more? What would freak the world out more? Ghosts are real, or E.T. is visiting us? Right?
Boy, I don't know the answer. Both of them would weird people out probably a little bit, but I think most people believe that ghosts are real. I mean, most people tell me that, well, I've never told anyone before, but I had, my father died or my mother died, and then they came to me and they spoke to me, or I smelled my father's aftershave, and you know, that kind of thing. Oh, that happens to so many people. And
it does. You know, I could go either way on that. It seems that I think most people today accept that we're not alone in the universe, right? That I don't think that would freak them out.
No,
Ghosts might freak people out. You know what? Okay, now there's a third part to this question. I'm so glad you're on the show. What would freak people out more, Atlantis or E.T.?
I think what would freak people out more is E.T. unseen coming into their homes and communicating with them telepathically.
Oh, that would freak me out. That would
it freaked me out when it happened.
That would freak me out. You know, we're going to stay right here with Betty and Barney for a second.
Okay.
You're a therapist, and you've been working at that for a very, very long time. And as you know, I've told you this before, I was always reticent for doing any kind of therapy or regression, but I did it last year. And the stuff, and I did it for TV, by the way. So we taped it. Okay. And with Sarah Breskman Cosme. And the stuff that I didn't know about that I said was shocking. And I went back and I watched the tape. I was like, what, you know, and my higher self was speaking about me in the third person, which kind of freaked me out too as well. I'd never gone through any of that. Yeah, exactly. And one of the reasons why I didn't want to expose anything was because of Betty and Barney's tapes and the book. I remember reading Interrupted Journey, and when you read the transcriptions of their sessions, it's pretty scary stuff, you know, and it's emotional too. It's very emotional. And then when you listen to the tapes of it, I was like, man, do I really want to go through that kind of emotional swing? Well, I did. I chose to do that. And that type of therapy really surprised me about how effective it is in the right hands. And is that the best part of the case when it comes to Betty and Barney? Is the sessions, or is it something else?
Oh, to me, the best part of the case is the physical evidence. That was a case that had a lot of physical evidence, and I've never stopped seeking scientists who were willing to evaluate the evidence. And I mean, with something really exciting has happened not that long ago. I hardly mentioned it on any shows, but when I wrote the 60th anniversary edition of Captured, then I wrote about it, and there were 2 tenured professors at Penn State and or was it University of Pittsburgh? It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And 35 years experience, chemistry professors, and they're teaching a student how to use this equipment. And I had sent them samples from Betty's dress. And on Betty's dress, they found 2 substances that really were very, very shocking. One was tellurium. Now, tellurium is very rare in the Earth's crust, but abundant in the universe. The other one was, let me get my book. I'm having a brain cramp tonight. It's really late. I'm usually in bed at this time. The other one was rhodium.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah,
right,
and
right.
rhodium is one of the rarest and most valuable precious metals on Earth, with a higher melting point and lower density than platinum. And there was no logical earthly explanation for the presence of these rare minerals on Betty's dress. It was just, unbelievable. Is that a smoking gun? She couldn't have picked that up. Just
Well, how much
dress up.
rhodium? How much rhodium is in the entire state of Connecticut? Right? None, right? Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And what were their conclusions? I mean, how that you have 2 really rare things, but 2 rare things at the same time on a woman's dress. What are the odds, right?
Right. And there was selenium too, and selenium is a poisonous metal, but that was used in dyes back in the 1950s. So that is probably accounted for in dyeing the material, the fabric for Betty's dress. But the other 2, tellurium and rhodium, they said they could find no earthly explanation for how that arrived there. And I started to think about, well, how could that have happened? Did it happen when they removed Betty's dress, breaking the zipper in the process, and then it fell into a heap on the floor and she stepped out of it? Did she pick that up, and the pink powdery substance that grew on that dress from the floor of the craft, from these entities' hands, where they wrapped their hands around her arms when they were escorting her? That's all I can think of. It had to have come from that craft. There's no other logical explanation for how that was found.
Now, and staying on this, the nuts and bolts, and I say that with respect, not only to you but to everybody else, because it's become cliche, but we all thought that way for a very, very long time.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And the description that Barney originally how the craft looked at the windows, seeing beings in the craft, the uniforms, and that sounds like a nuts and bolts situation. But that doesn't mean that the craft flew for 1,000,000 light years, right? Or
Right.
100 light years to get here, it still could have had some type of exotic propulsion system. And they originally described it as a bright star in the sky that was following them, right? And so that's very similar to the same eyewitness testimony, and myself included, that happens today, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the way it begins. Now, that there were witnesses to the craft that night, and two of the men that were witnesses were in the state of Maine. They were in the Navy. They were recruits. They're out to visit one of the men's girlfriends, and they're returning home when they have this spectacular sighting of this craft that seems to be coming out of the Atlantic Ocean. And Pease Air Force Base later that night on its radar saw a craft coming in from the direction of the ocean. So was it under the ocean? Do they have a base under the Atlantic Ocean? And is that where they're coming from? It makes sense. They won't be shot at like they would be if they just entered the Earth's atmosphere. They wouldn't, if they were studying this planet, they wouldn't want to travel 39 light years home and then come back a week later. Whatever.
Unless it's really easy.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
If it was really easy, they might take a vacation.
Right. Which kind of takes me back to my first question at the beginning of the interview, which is, how has your theories evolved after 8 books and this much research and investigation, not only with Betty and Barney Hill, but 5,000 experiencers, and getting all of you compile all inside of your head. How has your thoughts and theories changed, and where are you today? Because we have more sightings today than ever before.
Absolutely, and my thoughts and theories have changed dramatically from the time that I really started investigating this. When I moved back to New Hampshire and was very close to Betty, and so she was my mentor back in the 1980s. And then it was in 1991 when I began my formal investigation of her case after I joined MUFON and I trained to become an investigator. So back in those days, it was all nuts and bolts. What you were looking for, if somebody had an abduction experience, and everybody called them abductions back then. We've changed that. They're experiences or contact events today. But if in order to believe that an abduction had actually occurred, you had to have physical evidence. And, it was really a terrible way to treat people, I thought, because, over time, I began to realize that I don't live in these people's bodies. I'm not in their homes. How do I know? I mean, I know that those little guys that dealt with Betty did not want her to take anything off that craft. My aunt wanted to abscond with, that was sort of like a tablet with 6 vertical rows of symbols on it, seemed to be embedded into it. She was carrying it. She tried to take it off the craft, and those little guards did take it away from her. They wouldn't let her have it. So how are you going to abscond with a lot of evidence from the craft? Generally, is it on radar? Did you get it on the craft on radar? Did it leave a mark on the ground where it landed? Did it leave an electromagnetic field around the car? That was the focus in those days. There wasn't a lot of focus on the impact that this had on experiencers. And my background is in social science, sociology, psychology. And psychiatric social work, and I really was concerned about the people. These people were being hurt.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And everybody wants, well, me too. I'm not going to say that I don't, but everybody wants the sensational side of it, right? They want, they want, and I get that. I totally do. I'm fascinated with it. But when you look at this case, one of the biggest gifts for the people that want sensational stuff, something big, something extraordinary, you've got the star map. And which is something I wanted to ask you about, because when Betty, we're talking about 1961 here, and we didn't know about anything on the other side of the sun. We didn't have satellites. We didn't have a way of looking out. We didn't know what was over there. That's number one. But number two, the way that she was told and the way that she described the star map, the trade routes, right? This is our star system. This is what we do. These dotted lines mean this. This means this. And she turns around and draws the star map. Well, I want your thoughts on this. But that right there is something that was never described in any other events like this. Maybe ever. Right. And that was a very, very important part of this case, wasn't it?
But other people have been shown star maps. On our MUFON study on 516 experiencers, we discovered that 12% had been shown star maps. But
Betty was the first.
Betty was the first, as far as I know. Right. And Marjorie Fish did extraordinary work in order to identify those stars, and she did not get a match. She built 14 models, three-dimensional, going to the university, hand copying down the distance data because she couldn't take the catalogs home. We couldn't photocopy in those days. And so, she did that. She built these models with silk thread and with beads of different sizes and colors to represent the different colors of the stars, the characteristics of the stars. She studied all of that. 54 light years out from our planet in all directions. And still, she didn't find a match after a few years of doing this. And then we made technological progress. And when we made that progress, she went back to the university. She took the catalog. She copied the new distance data. She rearranged the stars according to the new distance data. And lo and behold, she had a match. And so that's how Stan Friedman was called in on this. Cora Lorenzen from APRO said, well, Stan, if you happen to be in Ohio, can you stop and interview Marjorie Fish and let me know what you think about her. And if you think that she's worthy of having her identification model vetted by astrophysicists, can you find some scientists who will vet her work? So that's what Stanton did. And they vetted her work and they said that the map was accurate. And there was so much more to it. Like all of the stars on Betty's map are sun-like stars, although only 5% of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood out 54 light years are sun-like. So that was pretty amazing. And they're all on a plane. Stanton used to say it's like traveling from one pepperoni to another on a pizza, as opposed to raisins that are all spread out in a loaf of raisin bread. So that was a really good thing. In fact, one of the scientists who vetted Marjorie's work actually said that if we had lived on Zeta Reticuli, on a planet around Zeta Reticuli, and we had developed the technology to explore space, that is precisely the route that we would take. So I thought that was really interesting when I read that. So
Yeah, here's Marjorie's map right here.
yes,
Of the way that she laid it out. This is her work, and from the additional data that we got from satellites and telescopes. Marjorie Fish was relentless on this. She did the same thing that so many of us did. We read The Interrupted Journey, and then our life changed, right? And we all did the same thing. And she would not give up. And this is the star map that she put together. And when you overlay this over Betty's drawing, it's identical.
It's pretty close. It's the distance between Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2 is a little shorter than what Betty drew, but from the angle that Betty was looking up into it, the scientists realized that that's the way that it appeared to her as she was standing there. And there has been an update on that. It was done in 2013, and the young astrophysics student, I think graduate student, who did it, analyzed 2,289 different models on the Celestia and digital universe for possible matches. So, I mean, here's Marjorie with 14, and now we have almost 2,300. And of course, computerized. And she said that still today, Marjorie's work is 86% accurate. There might be two stars that are a closer match than what Marjorie found. But this was specifically on exoplanets. And the nearest star system that is even a close match to what Betty sketched was like something like 100 light years away. It was really, really far in the distance. And so still, it seems to be holding up today under scrutiny with modern technology.
And the way that, I wanted to share this with, I don't know if I've told you this before, and it's been a while since I mentioned this, so I'll tell the story again. I moved into this house in Pasadena. Okay. I was a kid. I was like 21 years old. And pretty nice size house. And it was empty when I moved in. No furniture, right? And I was like literally sleeping on blankets in my bedroom. I was 20. Who cares, right? It's 21. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking through the empty house. And I think it was my first night. And I go to this front bedroom and I'm just opening up doors. There was no furniture. It was all empty. And I open up this closet and I see two books in an otherwise empty house, by the way. Empty. Not a cup. I didn't have silver. Nothing. I see these two books and I pull them down. And one was an Andreessen affair, Betty Andreessen, right? Uh-huh. And the other one, An Interrupted Journey.
Is that right? I wonder why they left them there.
Yeah, isn't that the strangest thing? So I go back and I started reading Fuller's book in my bedroom alone in this house. And honestly, not the smartest idea, but I didn't know, right? I didn't know.
Like in bed before you fell asleep at night.
Woo! And I couldn't put the book down. But it's just, you don't ignore the universe. That was left for me.
Uh-huh.
Right. Of course it was. And Betty Andreessen too, as well. And
yeah, she had a really interesting case.
Man,
really interesting.
Two amazing books.
Mm-hmm.
So in An Interrupted Journey, Betty talks about, again, this is 1961. Now today we have technology and you and I are doing this in real time and flat screens and computers and laptops and smartphones, and it's a different world. I get that. But in 1961, we had 3 television channels that were all in black and white with rabbit ears, right? There wasn't, right?
Yes, little ones too.
Yeah, little one. And for Betty to describe this 3D map that was projected up for her and the technology there, this whole case is full of firsts. And not only the map, but it's how she was presented and shown the map, right?
Right. It was, she just was grateful to that one she called the leader, that I call an escort, and an educator and translator, but communicator. But she just said, I know you're not from around here. Where's your home port? And he did something with the wall, and then this map just appeared. And it was like 3-dimensional. She's described it as sort of like looking out a window at the stars, or even Marjorie Fish was wondering if it was like a holographic image that she was looking at from the way Betty described it. So, something of technology that we certainly didn't have in that time frame. And, Betty took that memory with her. And Betty had a very, very good memory, especially for facts and figures, things like that. She saw all of those little things. I see the big picture. She had all the facts and figures. And
in your research, are the similarities that only you would know to Betty and Barney Hill from other experiencers? And I do like that, by the way, abductees. We're not abductees. We're experiencers. It's that TV show, People of Earth. Do you remember that they sat around and had an argument at their session, right? The experiencer session, and somebody shows up for the first time and says, you'll love this, oh, so you guys are all abductees. We're not abductees. We're experiencers.
Right.
I love that. So but Betty and Barney describe when they were going down the road and they pull up to the craft, and what they were going through at that moment, being drawn in, right? There was something, there was a force, something was happening. Do you see that across other cases too as well, where the situation is out of your control, is just going to happen?
Yeah, it's like, an Oz effect. You're there, you're in your natural environment. They were driving down the highway, and then suddenly they're on a dirt road, and there are these tall trees all around, and there's a roadblock, and it's just really weird. And these non-humans that Barney said, they're the ones I saw when I was looking into the craft, when I was standing in the field. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Betty panics. She hadn't known what to expect before. It was this confusion, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, I have to get out of here. And she tried to run into the woods. She opened the door, and they pointed something at her, more technology, pointed something at her, and she lost consciousness. She gained consciousness when they were taking her down to the craft. I mean, and they had something that they could use to float Barney.
That was actually my next question. Is there other experiencers that describe that same type of situation of being floated? You're not walking?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That happens. If you're very frequently, particularly in the times when they would like sort of either walk you out to the craft or they would float you to the craft. I wrote about that in the Alien Abduction Files with Jenny Henderson when she and her husband and baby were being taken to craft at night. And the ETs had actually gone into the house and were taking them out. And she was barefoot and her feet were hurting on the lawn. And so the little escort just began floating her along so that her feet wouldn't hurt, floating her toward the craft. Think of the people who are taken from their homes where there is a special kind of light that comes into their environment. And then sometimes there are like orbs inside that light. There might be 3 orbs that expand into non-humans. And then the non-humans are there and you're awake. And if you haven't trained yourself to overcome your fear, you're going to have the flight or fight response. That's just normal for us as humans. But if you have overcome that, like you can just say certain words to yourself and put yourself sort of into a hypnotic trance, and then you can project love toward them. If you can train yourself to do that, it's very different. Your relationship with them will change and improve. And, then maybe you become an orb when you're taken to craft through that special light. Friend of mine who is a UFO investigator on MUFON's experiencer resource team really wanted to have an event happen. And he lives in the city, houses are close together. And he was in bed one night. He and his wife were awake. And this light just came in through the wall. And he actually watched these little ETs, or non-humans, just step right in to his bedroom. And he had been really wanting this to happen. And they went over and they hooked some hoses up to him and they started removing things from his body. And that's when he became terrified. He's like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. But,
that's why I don't want to be regressed. Right there. I don't want to know that stuff. When in my regression, there what happened to me, I'm not going to tell you the long story, but I went, and I didn't have a memory of this, by the way. Okay. Now I do. I remember the whole thing. It's only 5 seconds, but I wasn't transported. I just appeared. That's it. I don't have any sensation of but I wasn't scared. That was the trippy thing. I didn't and I go back and I watched the video of it, and I'm just talking very matter of factly that I was just hanging out. And the whole thing was only 5 seconds. I scanned and then boop, I'm back. And I was with Billy Carson, Kathleen, when this happened. And
was it like you bilocated? You were in one place and then you were in another?
Well, so I asked Billy, I go, you remember that time when we were on top of the mountain? He goes, yeah. And I said, we saw that craft go over. And he goes, yeah. I said, I just did this regression, man. I went on that ship. And he goes, okay. I go, what do you mean? Was I acting weird? He goes, dude, I was looking at the ship. He said, so you were standing next to me and we were watching it together. That's, so I was, he didn't see anything. So, I don't know. I don't have an explanation. I do know this though, Kathleen, I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared.
Most people aren't once they arrive on the craft. Something happens and and you feel like you're in a familiar environment. You're not frightened any longer. I'm wondering, if you were standing next to him and he saw you there the entire time, was this an out-of-body experience? Was your consciousness up there on that craft interacting with those entities? Because they can do that.
Yes, I've asked myself these are great questions. I've been asking myself all of I don't know. You know what though? Okay, so here's the trippy thing for me. I was obviously in some form physically on the ship, because one of the dudes, and there was like 3, 6, 9, 10, there was 11 that were on the ship. And so 9 of them were sitting down in groups of 3 with their backs to me. 2 were standing in the middle of the room. One of them turns to me, I swear on all that is holy, Kathleen. He turns to me and he goes, "What's up?" And goes back to me. That's what he acknowledged me like a friend does. You know, like, what's
was
up?
It your etheric body?
I don't know. He saw me though.
An etheric body.
When I appeared in the room, he turned and looked at me and gave me the nod and went back to his business. Yeah. Yeah. It was man.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like
and he was
as an observer.
He was black. Black, like fuzzy. Not like fur, like out of focus.
Oh, okay.
They all were. They were all the same. They didn't look strange to me. They looked tall and thin and stuff. And see, that's why you're a good investigator. You're getting all of this stuff out of me. But they were like tall. They had hands, arms, legs, a head.
Describe their body type.
And they spoke English.
Could you hear it?
Yeah, they spoke Californian.
Wow.
It was like weird. It was weird.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. It's such a, I heard one of them, Kathleen, talking to somebody else, like on a radio or something. Radio is the only word I can think of. It was very brief, but for 1 second, I'm looking at him and I heard him talking, and he said something like, "Yo, man, what's up? Yeah, okay, we're coming by. And it's good to talk to you." And then I hear the other voice like say something back. "Yeah, man, okay, everything good? Everything's good. Okay, cool. All right." That's what it was like, a conversation like that between friends. And I think he was talking to like the military, at a base, or I don't know, the police. I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't know. But
that's really strange.
Yeah. And I saw his mouth moving, taller than me. Okay. So I'm 6 foot, and I definitely was looking up at them. So
what about their arms and their legs?
Very fat. Didn't see. It was dark. Okay. But I did see them like from the waist up. I'm assuming they had 2 legs, but they definitely had arms and hands, because they were holding. The 2 guys in the middle of the room had like a pad of paper or something, like a thing, and they were looking at it, and the 2 of them were talking about it. So I saw that. I saw like a little hand movement, and but it was just 5 seconds. I just looked around the room. I heard that guy talking over here. I got the nod from the guy, and I kind of looked at these guys over here, and then boop, I was back to standing next to Billy.
Huh. Isn't that strange?
Mm-hmm.
What were their faces like? Well, you could only see
the heads were egg, like oval, like tall ovals is the best, like a long. Okay, I didn't see. I think I saw eyes, and I could see like like the mouth moving when they were talking. I could kind of see a little texture, but it was just, again, just if you go into a room, okay, you and I one day, you came in and the two of us we sat on a couch. We were at a party. You remember this. And we sat on the couch and we talked for like 3 hours, right?
Yes.
Okay. So imagine walking into that room with those people and you're in there for 5 seconds and then you walk out. What do you remember? Well, you're going to remember, like the basic thing. It was like that for me.
Yeah.
It was just like a friendly room with some people. I got the nod, right? Which was weird. And then I was back next to Billy. So
very strange, probably etheric body, out of body experience, consciousness up there for just a very brief period of time.
It was,
and then
it was, and I remember, now I remember it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know about this. And my higher self was like, my higher self says, Jimmy doesn't know about this, but this thing happened. I'm like, who are you? And what do I not know? It was weird. It was a whole bizarre experience. Anyway, now I've got the whole thing. And so it felt like the room was a dome. Feels that way to me now.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw any like walls. It was all dark. I didn't see any windows. There was no medical table in the middle of the room. There was nothing of that. The floor was black. They were black. I saw their faces were illuminated. They were all looking down. So I could see like a glow.
So what was illuminating the faces? Were they glowing or? You don't know?
No. They were like at computer terminals, and I'm not even saying that that's what it was.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get a chance to like look at all of that, but I could see that they were all looking down, and there was a slight light on each of their faces. I saw that. Not the two dudes in the middle of the room. They were dark.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They were dark. But the guy that was talking, I could see the glow and I could see his mouth move. And dude was speaking Californian, and I watched it come out of his. I heard it. It wasn't telepathy. No, it was like he was talking.
Wonder if it was a human up there.
It was. I mean, he was talking on a. He was talking on a like a speakerphone or something. I don't know.
Weird.
God, I sound crazy right now, Kathleen.
That's what everybody says, Jimmy. That's what they all say. Tell me, it was all dark in there when you were in there, except for this glow. What was it like when you were standing on the ground looking up at it?
It was a gold ball.
Okay.
A big gold ball. What had happened was this. So Billy and I and Elizabeth, we had 20 friends, and we all went to Giant Rock. That's where this happened.
Okay.
So we're at Giant Rock. Next to Giant Rock is another hill, and we drove, up onto this hill, and we had night vision and food. We had all the stuff. It was great. It was an amazing night. Mm-hmm. And so we're standing there, and then off to the west, low in the sky, is this gold light, and it's coming towards us. And we all saw it, and we were all commenting on it, but we're also looking up. We're looking all over. But this light kept getting closer and closer and closer to us, and it was low, like low. I was like, man. And Billy says, that's an airplane, man. Nobody's shining any lasers on it. We don't want to get in any trouble. And he's right. Okay.
Right.
But I'm looking at it, and I don't see any flashing lights. I'm like, that doesn't look like an airplane. And it's going really slow, and it comes right over us. Then I'm looking at it in the night vision. I go, Billy, and then it stops right above us, and then it turns, and it's low. Kathleen, it's just a couple thousand feet. It's just right there. And now it's a big gold ball, and it turned, and we're all screaming, right? We're all flipping out, and it stops, and then it just goes straight up and disappears. Mm-hmm. And Billy says at that moment, I reserve the right to say that was not a plane. And we all laughed. So that was the experience. And that's what I remember. That's what Billy remembers. And then I did that regression, and that's all I got. Yeah, it's crazy. The whole thing. I sound nuttier than squirrel poop. I do. I realize. I know. And the thing is, when you have shared your experiences with me over the years, the audience and it's called respect. Listen to the experience. What can we learn from it?
Mhm.
And I have an open mind. And now I'm the person sharing this, and I just want the respect from everybody else. Just listen to it. You don't have to believe it, but just put it in your pile of information, and maybe it'll help you later. That's all I can say.
Well, I'm an experiencer advocate, and I believe that everyone deserves respect. I've become very angry when people ridicule other people who've had these experiences, where these people just say it's impossible, or you've met demons, or whatever. Give people respect. That's the least we can do to other human beings.
Well, see, and back to Betty and Barney, and then we'll take a break here in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Betty and Barney, it's the obvious interracial couple in 1961. You've already got a whole lot of crap you're dealing with in society, right? You are. It's just the world. And then this event happens. For Barney, how did it affect him? Because it wasn't like, well, today it's difficult enough, but at least it's easier today to talk about these things. But in 1961, it wasn't that kind of party, was it, Kathleen?
No, it was like Barney wanted to forget about it. That's what he kept telling Betty. Just forget about it, Betty. No good can come of this. And she wouldn't forget it because she was extraordinarily curious. She wanted answers. And so she started looking for answers, whereas he just suppressed it. That's why he ended up in the hospital with bleeding ulcers. And I'm sure of that. Had to take a 3-month leave of absence from his job because those non-humans that he had conscious memory for seeing on that craft, and that feeling that he was going to be captured, stayed with him. And there was that physical evidence to go along with it. He couldn't let that go. And it had a devastating impact on Barney. And, then they did talk to the Air Force. They did talk to NICAP, to Walter Webb. And then they started talking to scientists and military officers who were interested in that. It was really the military officers that helped them, that sort of said, we know this is real. And so gave them support, especially Rear Admiral Herbert Knowles, who lived up in Maine, just across the river, was a big support to them. And then Barney had a friend, James McDonald, who was retired from the Air Force. He was CIA, and he gave Barney support, and Betty too. The family gave them support as well. So, but still, it was a difficult thing to go through. You didn't want the public to know about this. And so the impact of that violation of confidentiality was just as bad for Barney as the experience itself. The emotional impact on Barney was terrible when that occurred, because he had been appointed to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, State Advisory Committee for New Hampshire. He was the head of the NAACP. He was on the regional board as the legal redress. He had received an award from the Archdiocese in Manchester, New Hampshire, for setting up a literacy program so that people would learn to read, and therefore they would be able to vote. He had been the chairman of the committee that set up the Rockingham County Community Action Program with funding from the U.S. Office of economic opportunity. He'd been given a big award for that. He's in the paper. He's speaking on civil rights where in New Hampshire, wherever he is invited to speak. He's an advocate for civil rights. And all of a sudden, there it is in the Boston newspaper. Betty and Barney Hill were abducted by aliens, and it even gave their address in Portsmouth. Oh yeah. I mean, and I saw their emotional reaction to this, and it was just awful. And we met it as a family, and where do we go from here? And so that is when we decided that since it had already been published for 5 nights in a row, then Betty and Barney had ought to address it. And so they spoke for the first time to a public audience, and they'd spoken to confidentially to members of their church, the couples, people at the couples club, that kind of thing, just confidential meetings. But they spoke at the Universalist Unitarian Church in Dover, New Hampshire. They were introduced by the public information officer from Pease Air Force Base, who first spoke and talked about UFO sightings in the area. And Betty and Barney did not speak about the abduction. They only spoke about the close encounter with the craft. And John Fuller, who wrote The Interrupted Journey, was there that night. Admiral Knowles was there to give them support. And it was to an overflow, enthusiastic crowd. The people in New Hampshire knew Betty and Barney, and they believed that it was true because they knew they weren't a couple of kooks. They knew if they said something, it was the truth. But then you had these disinformants, because the military certainly doesn't want the public to believe that anyone is being picked up by non-humans in these unconventional craft. So then the military comes in, and these disinformants come in, and they make Betty and Barney look like a couple of nuts. That comes out of the 1953 Robertson panel plan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's what you do with people who doesn't matter if you're the one making the public report, or if it's a violation of confidentiality that ruins your life, you're the target for attack at that point. And so you are painted with a new brush. You're not the person you really are. You're like the lies they told about Betty, that she was a lifelong flying saucer enthusiast and a lifelong science fiction fan. And that's nonsense. It's a lie. That's not true. That Barney was such a weak man that he would do and believe anything that Betty told him. Barney was a brave man to be married to a white woman in 1960. That's when they got married. Barney was a brave man to be a civil rights leader. He had an outstanding reputation. He was a man thoughtful, intelligent, well-spoken, and introspective. He could have been a college professor in the way he behaved and carried himself. And, to be painted this way was terribly distressing.
He died in 69 or thereabouts, right?
February of 69.
February of 69. And so, 8 years, seven and a half years after this, he passes away. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's your job, Kathleen, to correct me when I'm wrong. Okay. So
I will do that.
I think you went to go live with your Aunt Betty after Barney passed, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what happened?
That's true. Betty and Barney were helping me through college financially. I had loans, but they were paying for my room and board. And since Barney had died, there's one income that is no longer there. So I moved into Betty's house with her. I had a separate apartment, but we kept the doors open. I was down in at the basement level, a finished basement apartment, and there was a stairway between the two apartments. The doors were unlocked. We even had an intercom between our apartments. Yeah.
Now, how cool is that? Now, and I'm serious. I mean, how cool is that? What about, now you mentioned Jacques Vallée, you mentioned Walter Webb, and NICAP, and for most of the audience, they hear about NICAP because of this show. But NICAP back then was a very, 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 very big deal, especially with their push in Washington. If you think we're going through disclosure today, go back and listen to Donald Kehoe preach in 1960 with NICAP. So what about Donald Kehoe and Leonard Stringfield and others? Did you get a chance? Were they coming by and visiting with Betty? And did they have interest in the case?
They weren't coming by to visit Betty. I hadn't met Donald Kehoe or Leonard Stringfield, but Betty knew Leonard Stringfield and liked him. In fact, he was the first person that she gave samples of her dress to. Right. And he sent them to the chemistry department at the University of Cincinnati. And my first husband and I, after college, ended up moving to Cincinnati. He was studying for his master's and doctorate there. And I was studying part-time while I ended up with a job teaching school in the inner city. I couldn't get a job in social work there. They didn't think this little blonde, 5-foot-tall girl off the farm in New Hampshire would be safe working in the men's psychiatric unit at the hospital. And that's where I wanted to work. I had been working at the men's psychiatric unit as a student for a semester as sort of an internship in New Hampshire. It was great, but they weren't comfortable with that in Cincinnati.
I'm 15 minutes past the break. One last question, and then we do have to take a break.
All right.
A few years ago, Barack and Michelle Obama started a film production company, and they said that their first project was going to be Betty and Barney Hill. What's the update on that?
I haven't the slightest idea. I haven't heard anything about it. Nobody ever contacted me about that, or if they did, I just passed them on because I already have a contract on Captured. So I wasn't involved in it whatsoever. I don't know if it's really going to become a production. A lot of times they'll announce, a big movie is going to be made, but then they have to find the funding, and then they have to find the actors. And, this was going to be made for Netflix, I guess it was. I haven't heard a word.
Yeah, that's right. It was Netflix. That's right. Yeah. Well, they certainly made, Hollywood. They made a big announcement about this. This was the buzz of Hollywood for a minute. And then I just never, it's like I'm expecting it to show up on Netflix any day. But you're saying that they never contacted you? Why? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, the Obamas didn't. I remember receiving an email message from 2 or 3 writers from, I think they were from Chicago, and they were going to make a movie. And I said, well, Bryce Zabel has the rights to Captured. So if you want to talk to me, it's in my contract that you have to go through Bryce.
Right. And then that the documentary series, the 3-part, came out, 2 years ago? Am I right about that?
What documentary series?
There's the Betty and Barney Hill story. Was it 2 years ago? It was a 3-part documentary.
Oh, was that the one? Was I in it?
Yeah.
I had a pretty big role in it.
Yes.
Okay.
It was yours.
Yes. And Bryce was involved in that, and Ben Hansen was involved in that.
Yes, Ben Hansen was great. Yes.
That was really great. I was so pleased that the producers of this show wanted the truth. I gave them a lot of my records. I have all of Betty's records. I also set up the archival collection at the University of New Hampshire. But I have all of those records. And so I was sending them all sorts of information. And they did their very best to do an accurate production. I was so
well done.
Pleased.
So well done.
I thought it was incredibly well done. Yes.
So well done. The production level was
way up there. Very good.
And very detailed. And the case is, here's the thing. The case is so big. There is so much there that you still leave stuff on the table. Right? And a 3-part documentary like that, that's just loaded with information. And there's still stuff that you can't get it all in. It's that big of a case.
Yes, it is. There is so much that I don't even talk about. The paranormal part, what happened when Betty was doing those psychophysics or CE5 experiments. That was during that time frame when there was that huge UFO flap in New Hampshire, when John Fuller was writing Incident at Exeter.
That's right.
Which was published before. But Betty, as soon as their hypnosis sessions ended, got in touch with Robert Homan and C.D. Jackson, who were from NICAP and were scientists. They worked at IBM. And they're the ones behind these psychophysics experiments that Betty was participating in. They talked her into doing it. They gave her the script at this longitude and this latitude, so many days into this year, so many minutes into this day, please appear here. It was that kind of thing.
So fascinating. Let's take our break. Let me get this in. Okay. Kathleen, you just stay right there. We'll be right back. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Kathleen Marden. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Hi, this is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I want to invite you to come to Alaska with me on the Contact at Sea cruise. It is this September 6th through the 13th, 2024. We are on the largest ship in the Pacific Ocean. That's right, the Ovation of the Seas. It's an amazing cruise, and a ship this big is so much fun. We've got lots of activities and lots of great speakers. We are leaving from Seattle to Sitka, Alaska, Skagway, Juneau. We're going to end the cruise in Victoria, BC, and arrive in Seattle on September 13th. We've got a lot of amazing speakers, including we've got Seth Shostak, Scott Walter, Stephen Bassett, Daniel Sheehan, Daryl Sims, Mas Adi, Vivian Chavez, Grant Cameron, Geraldine Orozco, Misha Johnston, and Melanie Aguirre, and a whole lot more. All you have to do is go to divinetravels.com. You can also go to contact@sea.com. Both are going to take you to a full event schedule. You can check in, look at the boat, get things ready to go, and maybe get a cabin with a balcony. That's what I'm talking about. Come see the whales. Come check it all out. Let's go to Alaska this September 6th through the 13th, 2024 with me, Jimmy Church. Now, when you head to divinetravels.com or contact@sea.com and get signed up, you know what? Use my name, Jimmy Church. I'll see you there September 6th through the 13th, 2024. Let's go to Alaska. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's fade to black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter @JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Kathleen Marden is with us. Kathleen, I want to go back for a second. When you moved in with your Aunt Betty, 1969, if you don't mind, I don't want to get too personal, but anything happen? Well, okay, now you're laughing. Was there any contact experiences or anything strange? Can you talk about that?
Yes, sure I can. You asked about people who had been visitors at Betty's house. Marjorie Fish was there. She's one of the ones that I met.
You met Marjorie Fish?
Yes, she came to visit. That was really something else. It was right in August. She was there on my birthday, August 4th. So, yeah, she was like a quiet kind of nerdy woman, I thought.
She was a teacher.
But that's what it takes to do the kind of work that she did. I mean, she was so meticulous, but a really nice person too. And she saw how Betty's telephone was tapped. Something weird happened when Marjorie was there, and I have the letter that Marjorie wrote to Betty and said, "Well, if anyone says that your phone isn't tapped, I will testify that it is tapped because of what happened when I was there." Now, when I was there, I was a college student. I was driving Barney's car to college during the day. And one of the really weird things that happened is that I was downstairs. Betty was at work. She was still working as a social worker. So I'm downstairs on my bed with my books and I'm studying. And I hear the door open upstairs. The intercom's on all the time anyway. So I go running up the stairs to greet Betty, and she's not there. Call for her, look around. No, I thought, well, she stopped in for a minute to pick something up and she's left again. So I went back down and sitting on the bed again. And no sooner did I arrive down there, but crash, bang, heavy footsteps like running upstairs. And I ran like a flash up the stairs, and the front door to her apartment was open. The closet door was open, and there's a baseball bat on the floor. The front door to the apartment house is open. The gate is open, and there's a man in a kind of beigey brown suit running up the road. And I didn't try to catch him. But, people were going into her house to do weird things. Another thing that happened is it was tax time. She owned the apartment house, so she had all of the tax information on all of the apartments, and she had to put all of this information together to take it to her accountant. So she had it all ready to take, and suddenly it disappears. No explanation. What happened to that? So she's frustrated. She's lost it, or somebody's taken it. And so she has to go through the process of going to the electric company and getting all the receipts, the gas company, all the receipts for everything back. And, before computers, that was an awful lot of work. Having to get an extension on getting the taxes in. Finally, she gets it in. And she's late. She ends up getting audited the next year. But suddenly one day she comes home, and there, strewn in a trail around her apartment, are all of these tax documents that she had been taken from her house. The originals.
Not cool.
Not cool at all. Not cool at all. People were trying to freak her out, but
not cool. Not cool.
Betty wouldn't tell most people about this. It was never made public at the time, but there were terrible things being done just to make her feel distressed, frightened. She finally ended up having one of the first security systems put into her house, and it was wired so it would call the police department if somebody broke into her house again. And it happened one time, but that ended it after that.
Not cool. Not cool. And so two women, you and your aunt, living in this house alone, and you see the guy in the, you know, in the brown suit, and you hear all of this stuff going on. How you personally, how did you feel for your safety? It must have been stressful, is where I'm going with all of this.
Eventually I moved out. Got loans and moved away. It was, I think I was a little more naive than I am now. I don't know if I truly understood the magnitude of what was occurring, what was happening to my aunt. I mean, because she wasn't freaking out or crying or doing any of those things. She was a person who didn't show a lot of emotion, except for she would get mad. She was really angry that someone was doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. And she, I know she wanted to get back at them. And
I know you mentioned the CE5 part of this, or an early version of CE5. But did she ever? I've never asked you about this. Did she ever have another contact experience?
She did, but of course, you know, when you are being ridiculed by all of these disinformants, you don't want to announce that you've had another contact experience too. But I talked to the people who used to rent from her, who lived in her apartment. She always rented to people that she liked, who could be her friends. Sure. And so one night, one of the men was traveling. They'd come down to visit the family, and they were traveling back through East Kingston in the car at night. And East Kingston is a little bit of Kensington, and then you go into Exeter, and then from Exeter to Stratham and Portsmouth, all very close together, little towns and on the seacoast of New Hampshire. So they're driving through East Kingston, heading toward Exeter, and all of a sudden there is a craft, and the craft is beside their vehicle. And the next thing they know, they feel like they're going up a hill. And then it's almost like a moment has passed, and suddenly they're being set down as they're entering Exeter. So there's this stretch of road that they did not travel. That is so common. That just happens to so many people. And you know, so I'm sure she was taken again that night. How else do you explain it? And she told me that she was visited about once a year.
No kidding. Now, I was going to ask you about this earlier. It's a good opportunity to ask again, to ask what I was going to ask earlier. Barney describes one, I'm going to say species or type or whatever. I'm going to be completely politically incorrect. Looking out the window. All right. So he's got that description. And then apparently there was at least two different types of aliens or ETs that were on that craft. And Betty famously sculpted, you know, what she had seen.
Yeah, she and Marjorie did that together during one of Marjorie's visits.
Oh, is that how that sculpture came? Right? Okay.
Yes, they each made one.
So when Betty said that she was visited once a year, who was visiting her?
It was the leader, most likely. I mean,
okay.
We didn't really get into it. She didn't want to talk about it. She just,
Right.
She said, well, I was visited about once a year. And I'd say, well, why do you think that happened? Oh, they were just checking up on me and see who I was associating with, that sort of thing, she would say. So
Did she
she
sound
didn't.
right? Was it nonchalant? Right? Did she sound concerned or no?
No, nonchalant. It was more nonchalant. Like it was like, okay, they're back. In fact, when Betty was dying from lung cancer, I was taking care of her. And there was a time when I arrived in the morning. Her daughter was staying with her for that period of time. The two of us would take turns. I would go home for a week or two, and her daughter would stay there. But so I walk in the morning. I always showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and always they'd be dressed. The blinds would be open. Everything would be normal activity in the house, that sort of thing. This particular morning, I arrived and the blinds were still closed. And, they always were up by 6 o'clock in the morning. And I walked in, they're still dressed in their night clothes. And they said, something happened here last night, something. And so, well, what happened? Well, my aunt had fallen and she had fractured her wrist. And so there was a brace and an ace bandage, and she wasn't able to walk. That's the reason that she fell. She was using a walker or in a wheelchair, and she decided she was going to try to walk by herself. She'd fallen down and broken her wrist. So anyway, she can't walk, but the brace, the ace bandage wrapped around it was unfolded neatly on a chair across the room. How did that happen? Well, she didn't know how that happened. Her daughter Connie hadn't done it. And so then she had this little cat, Raisa, who was her favorite cat. And Raisa was always by her side. And suddenly Raisa is just frightened to death of Betty. She's hiding under her bed. If she has to go through the living room to go onto her litter box or where her food was, she just skirted the perimeter of the room as close to the wall as she could possibly get, all the time looking at Betty with fear in her eyes. Now, something else that happened is hospice was coming in and looking at Betty. And Betty also had a very good friend who was a medical doctor who would come up to New Hampshire and see her from time to time. And he was up, and there was a change in Betty. Her eyes had been like sort of whited over, very dull looking. And all of a sudden her eyes were shiny. Her health had improved. We thought that she had been healed, that she was going to get better. And this lasted for a little while. And then she declined. She lived for several more months. We knew the people from hospice said, well, maybe she's going to pass soon, because this happens to people who are going to pass within a week or two. Well, that didn't happen. She passed a few months later. But that was another weird thing. My husband and I were sleeping upstairs sometimes when I was taking care of Betty. And of course, we had a monitor in that room to Betty's room. Another night, I heard Betty, and she said, I heard this weird kind of buzzing sound that I've never It was never heard on Earth. It was really weird. And then I heard Betty say, "I never thought I'd see you again." And I thought, oh my gosh, she's being visited. And I tried to pry myself out of bed and descend those stairs to face this myself. And I just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. And the next thing I knew, my husband and I were out cold. So I don't know if we were visited too. I don't know what happened.
Right,
But,
right.
yeah.
Oh,
But there were
man.
some strange things that occurred in Betty's house.
Well, I wanted to ask you, in the short time that we have left, staying with Betty and Barney and all of the research and stuff that you've done with their case. But when you overlap that and you look at all of the mountains of data that you got through Free and all of those experiencers,
Yeah.
what
and
have you?
I did 2 studies too, one with PhD scientists, not just
Right.
Free.
What? No,
Yeah.
no. Let's add that. Let's add that to the
Okay.
pile.
Add that to the pile.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
What have you learned? And I was just looking at the chat, just briefly. I just looked over and it was 100 comments ago, but somebody had said, everybody in the chat is probably an experiencer, right? Well, maybe,
Mhm.
and it can't be where you have millions, if not maybe a billion people on this planet that have an experience like this. It's not some mass psychosis.
No.
It's not. It's simply not. Right. And so what have you learned besides that it's not a mass psychosis? What connections have you made? What have you learned?
Well, I've learned that experiencers are different from the general population. Experiencers undergo a change. It's almost as if they're walking in 2 dimensions at the same time, and they become psychic or intuitive. A lot of these people were taken from the time they were young children. In our study, 36% were taken when they were less than 6 years old, and 75% when they were less than 20 years old. So that's something that we have to add into this or factor into it. But you become more spiritual. You see the world differently. You're more concerned about the people of the world, and you think of yourself as being an earthling. You're not nationalistic any longer. It makes that change in you, and you care about other people. You care about the animals. You care about the environment. You care about the use of nuclear weapons. You just become a kinder, gentler person in general. You have conscious recall of at least one experience where these ETs have come into your environment. You've seen them, and you then became paralyzed. And a lot of people remember that part of it, either the beginning or the end. Some people remember parts of being on the craft. And more often, these non-humans are just coming in to visit you at your home. They come into your environment. The relationship changes over time. And when you overcome your fear, when you establish a loving sort of relationship, and I say loving, not that you have, what is it that I want to say Copenhagen syndrome, but it's not that. That syndrome where you fall in love with
Stockholm.
That's right.
Stockholm syndrome.
Having a little brain cramp. It's past my bedtime. So anyway, it's not Stockholm syndrome for most people, I don't think. People come to feel like these non-humans are their family, that you're all part of one consciousness, and you communicate telepathically. And they might come for a visit in your home. You can't see them, or you might see them as shimmering, or you might see them as a shadow, but you can feel that strong tingling sensation in your body in their presence, kind of almost a pleasant electrical tingling. You feel elated. It's almost like a religious experience in a sense, and they communicate with you telepathically. And so that happens now with a lot of people. People go out, on CE5 experiments now, and some people can call in craft. I know of one case in Australia where the craft actually landed. There was a group of people there, and the ETs got out and walked around among them. So there are things that are happening that didn't used to happen, as far as I know. And I think that's pretty exciting that they have this desire to be kind to humans. They're healing people. Many experiencers who have grown older, they've developed physiological problems that might be life-threatening, end up being healed. So
over
that's
the
another
years,
nice
over the
Yeah.
years, I had the honor and the privilege to hang out with you and Stanton, and you guys were for so long just joined at the hip,
Right.
everywhere. And it was great. But I have to ask you, and I miss the man. I know that you miss him. I miss him
Yes.
so much. But what would he say today where we are with this and the government? Would he be happy? Would he be angry at the government? Would he say, "I told you so"? I wish he was here to not only enjoy where we are at, but also express his opinion. What do you think? You knew him as well as anybody. What do you think he would say about the events of today when it comes to disclosure and contact?
Well, I know that Stanton was opposed to open disclosure, to full disclosure. He was very concerned that it would create public hysteria, and it hasn't so far. But I think that he would be watching it closely. I think he would be among the people who were really scrutinizing the military officers who have come forward, trying to determine whether or not they were telling the truth. He would be in that group of people, but he would also be very critical of the military for the stance, for the pushback that they've been giving, to their refusal to cooperate with the congressional committee on this. So he would be doing both of those things, I'm sure, and he'd be taking on the debunkers as usual.
The one, and I'll just say this: we all know that he had a big brain and a huge intellect.
Yes,
but he was
did.
also bleeping funny.
He was.
That was a funny guy,
He was.
and one of my proudest moments was on stage, and I made a slip of the tongue. Lazar came out of my mouth, right? Okay. Anyway, so Stanton, there's a panel, and I'm hosting it, and Stanton, blah, 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 right, and set me straight, and I thought to myself, I just got schooled by Stanton Friedman, and life doesn't get any better than that, right? So anyway, after that, I kind of gather myself. I'm a little ruffled. Anyway, so an hour later, we're done. We're backstage. And I said, man, that was fun. He comes up to me. He had his baseball hat on. Remember he wore that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
A
He comes
suit
up.
and a baseball cap.
Yeah. He comes up to me, slaps me on the back, and goes, "You did good, kid." I was like, man, he
He
was
was
just
like
so.
that. He was always encouraging younger people.
He's just. Yeah, I'm 60, and he calls me kid. But yeah, and I just miss him. I truly do. And when you mentioned James McDonald earlier, and we talked about Kehoe and Stringfield, and these people that Marjorie Fish is another great example of this, that worked so hard on this subject.
Mhm.
And right now it seems like it's never been more visible, it's never been more tangible. It's right here, and we're here because of them. And
We
I just
are.
wish that, I wish they were here to enjoy the moment. They deserve it.
Yes. They were the pioneers. They set all of this in process, and they did it so scientifically, so carefully and conservatively, and to move all of this forward, despite the mountain of ridicule and the distortion. And just, had on those blinders and looked straight ahead and did their work. And we've all benefited from that.
What do you think is next? We keep hearing about the NDAA and additions and what could be around the corner. We're in the middle of a crazy election year again, right? And so we've got to go through that, and things may be delayed, and we'll have to wait for another administrator. No matter what, there's going to be a new administration coming in, and we have to roll this thing along again into 2025. It's part of our country. This is what we do every 4 years. But it seems like these steps are starting to get climbed. Do you think that 2025 is we're going to have? I think, I don't know. We still have 6 months left this year.
We have to fight like hell for the congressional funding for to keep the committee running. We need to fight like hell to get this funding into the military budget to continue these UFO studies to acquire their information, because they have so much that they have locked away, compartmentalized. They don't want us to know about any of this. We need to ensure that any military whistleblowers will not be harmed, will not be threatened. They shouldn't have to wear around bulletproof vests. They shouldn't have to hide after this, after they come forward and under oath tell the truth, tell what happened to them. We have to keep moving forward, and it's going to take a public outcry. All of us, none of us can turn our backs. I know that I'm really worried, because I see that these disinformants are coming forward, and the younger ones are even worse than the Phil Class types.
No, man.
They're just really nasty bullies from what I've seen of them. And
you're right about that. You're right about that.
They have no class whatsoever, and something has to be done about that. And it makes me very angry if they're being funded to behave this way. If they're not being funded to behave this way, then a lot of them need to be charged, because they're committing crimes against people.
You would have made a great homicide detective. I'm being serious. I'm not playing around. I'm not playing around. You have a way of looking at things 3D and getting to the answers. But here's the other part with this. When we have Grush and Fravor and get up, raise their right hand and swear under oath and say the things that they did, That's a pretty big moment where that has never happened before. And you're right. That was great, but that doesn't mean it's an opportunity for us in our community to relax. It's
That's
not.
right.
No,
It's not.
this is when we take it one step further, isn't it?
That's right. We have to keep our eye on the military. We have to be in touch with our congressmen and women. We have to make sure that that funding is put into the military budget. We need to make sure that all of this is going to continue, because what do we have? We have the military releasing all of those debunking reports, the same old BS that they released back in the 50s, the 60s, those ridiculous reports that we've all read. They must know that this is their cover-up. It was so easy. They didn't have to do any work just to pull that baloney out of the files. And so that's what they give. It was insulting to our intelligence for them to do that. I just, it's another thing that makes me really angry.
You're right about that, though, because, Kehoe and Stringfield, James McDonald, right? Mm-hmm. And others were fighting. Hynek, just think about that, their efforts and how vocal they were, and the job, the Rand Corporation and the Condon Report and the Robertson Panel and all, their job was to discredit anybody that was working on this, and personal attacks, your job, your public persona, your family, all of this was fair game. Yes, to them, and that's just wrong, and it ruined lives. It absolutely ruined lives. So it needs to be in the NDAA. These people that need and want to speak about this should be allowed to do just that. That's the foundation. It's the foundation of this country, isn't it?
It is. And to be able to speak under oath without retribution. That's important. It's extraordinarily important in a free country, in a free and fair country.
I'll say one last thing, and I want your comment. We've just got a minute left. The questions that have been put forward, not only from the House subcommittee, Tim Burchett and the rest of them, but that also goes with the Senate Intelligence Committee, where the right things are being said and asked about, which tells me that these senators and representatives are well educated in the subject, and they know what to ask for. And it's never, ever been like this before. And I'm wondering, Kathleen, if somebody behind the scenes, and I don't know who the puppet masters are, but somebody has flipped the switch and said, it's okay now to talk about this, right? Do you think that that's actually what's going on, that suddenly, right, the pressure has been lifted and our elected officials are allowed to go ahead and move forward?
Well, why aren't they having open hearings?
I know, right?
Right. So I don't know if a switch has been flipped. I think that perhaps Tim Burchett and all of the others are just wanting to know that, they're saying this is the people's government. This government doesn't belong to the military. This is our government. We have the right to know if we're being visited. Now, the military wants to portray all of this as a grand threat to the earth. Well, if you look into the history, you know that these visitors have been around for a very, very long time, and they're not hurting us. They haven't invaded the earth. They haven't subjugated us. They're attempting to upgrade us. They're trying to prevent us from destroying this beautiful planet that we live on with our weaponry, helping us to get along with others. That's the agenda. If you look at as much of it as I have looked at, and people have the right to know this.
It's nature. The government doesn't have the right to keep nature from us. It's nature. It's just life in the universe.
It is.
But you're going to keep secrets from us, from a species in the Amazon rainforest? No, you don't have the right to do that.
No.
And you don't have the right to keep the secrets of our universe from us. Kathleen, keep fighting the good fight. You're the absolute very best. And I can't wait to see you again, my friend. Thank you.
Me too. This was a real pleasure. So good to see you.
You're the best. Thank you, Kathleen. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks.
Kathleen Marden, the best. Her links are below. Just an absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you, Kathleen. And once again, a perfect night on Fade to Black. And I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night, Glenn Kreisberg is with us. We will be talking about archaeoastronomy. Until then, go Beckley Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go Beckley Tappy.